On April 18, 1912, at 9:30 p.m. in New York, around 40,000 people, braving heavy rainfall, anxiously awaited something. It was the fateful night when a wave of sorrow was about to hit New York. These people had been waiting for 3 days, eagerly for a ship named the Carpathia. The Carpathia ship returned, carrying a heartbreaking story that still sends chills through people's hearts. It brought with it the tragedy of the RMS Titanic, a ship that was believed to never sink, yet it claimed hundreds of lives, sending them to the sea. Aboard the Carpathia were the few survivors who had witnessed the Titanic's brutal fate with their own eyes. This was a tragic event in history that no one can ever forget, leaving behind many mysteries. On April 10, 1912, when the Titanic was preparing for its first journey from Southampton, UK to New York, the atmosphere was quite different. People had heard so much about the Titanic that they gathered just to see its grandeur and beauty. It is believed that more than 100,000 people came to see the magnificence of the Titanic. And why wouldn't they? The Titanic was indeed majestic. The ship was 269 meters long and about 53 meters high. This is the incident of 10th April, 1912, RMS Titanic, world's largest and most luxurious ship in its time. It set out on its first voyage, traveling from Southampton, England, to New York. All kinds of people were aboard, renowned industrialists and actors, as well as immigrants who were on their way to America in search of a better life. It was being commanded by the 62-year-old senior captain, Edward John Smith. There was a lot of excitement regarding this ship among the passengers, public, and media. It was not only the world's largest ship, around 269 meters in length and more than 53 meters high, but the luxury on this ship was awe-inspiring. In those times, it cost $7.5 million to build the ship, which, if you take inflation into account, is equal to $400 million today. The facilities and decorations inside the ship could even leave a 5-star hotel behind. Stained glass mirrors, ornate wood paneling, 2 grand staircases, heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath, an electric bath, a gym, a squash court, 4 restaurants, 2 barbershops, and a library as well. Moreover, the kind of safety features used to build the Titanic led people to believe it was unsinkable. White Star Line, the company that built this ship, had a vice president who was so confident in the ship's safety that he had come out in front of the public and said that this ship is unsinkable.
Welcome to RisePeak, the channel where stories ignite your soul, facts blow your mind, and motivation fuels your every step. From untold tales of grit to fascinating truths that leave you inspired, we're here to empower your climb to greatness. Ready to rise? Let's go.
The moment arrived when, on April 10th, 1912, the Titanic embarked on its historic first journey. Captain Smith knew very well that during these months, the sea was full of icebergs. To avoid the danger, he decided to take the southern route, a slightly longer path, instead of the direct northern route. Icebergs are small ice mountains that break off from glaciers and float into the ocean. How small ice mountains from Greenland travel through this route and reach the Atlantic Ocean. It was in this region that many icebergs appeared during the month of April. However, it took nearly 2 years for these icebergs to reach the Atlantic Ocean, and by the time they arrived, they would melt into the sea. The larger icebergs were the only ones that remained intact enough to make it into the ocean. Captain Smith, in order to avoid the iceberg danger, chose a route that had fewer chances of encountering icebergs. At that time, ships didn't have advanced technology to spot icebergs, so there was a lookout at the crow's nest of the ship, where 1 or 2 people with binoculars would keep watch for any obstacles ahead. When the Titanic sailed, all ships sent messages to each other via wireless radio, warning about any obstacles. Halfway into the journey, Titanic received its first iceberg warning from the ship, Caronian, which was 1 day away from the Titanic. Senior Officer Jack Phillips operated the wireless radio system and stayed in contact with other ships. On April 14th, Titanic received its second warning about icebergs. Wireless operator Jack Phillips warned the captain about it. Joseph Bruce, the owner of the Titanic, was also aboard the ship. When Captain Smith informed Bruce about the iceberg warnings, Bruce dismissed them, believing icebergs were common and that the ship, being strong and unsinkable, would not be affected. He did not want the ship's speed to be reduced and cause delays. After this, Titanic received 5 more iceberg warnings. The final warning came from the SS California ship. It was nighttime, and unfortunately the sky was overcast, making visibility extremely poor. The lookouts in the crow's nest had no binoculars, making it even harder to spot any obstacles. Titanic was traveling at full speed, 40 kilometers per hour, and was only 2 hours away from the iceberg. Despite the danger, Titanic continued its journey through the dark waters without considering the looming iceberg in its path. By 11:30 p.m., Titanic was just 6 kilometers away from the iceberg, and at that speed, it would reach it within the next 10 minutes. In the crow's nest, 2 brave men, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, sat in the cold and dark, trying to spot any obstacles. They were facing freezing winds, and tears would form in their eyes because of the cold. They did not have binoculars, so they could not see far ahead, and in the low light, it was difficult to spot objects. At 11:30 p.m., Frederick Fleet saw the iceberg ahead. Without wasting any time, he rang the bell 3 times and quickly informed the bridge officers, instructing them to turn the ship left. First Officer William immediately took action, reversing the engines at full speed and turning the ship left. However, it was too late. The ship was moving too fast, and despite the efforts, it could not be stopped in time. The Titanic's right front side collided with the iceberg with a huge impact, shaking the entire ship. Unfortunately, the Titanic's double-bottom hull did not help, because the impact occurred on the side of the ship, where there was only a single layer of protection. When Captain Smith assessed the damage, he found that 6 compartments had been breached, and water was flooding in rapidly. He was shocked, because the ship was only supposed to stay afloat if 4 compartments were flooded. 6 compartments filling with water meant that the supposedly unsinkable ship would now sink. 20 minutes after the collision, at midnight, Captain Smith ordered the crew to send out distress signals so that nearby ships could come to their aid. Wireless operator Jack Phillips worked tirelessly, sending distress signals, but unfortunately, no nearby ship could pick them up. 6 compartments were now flooded, and the water started to overflow onto the decks. Captain Smith ordered the lifeboats to be launched, but unfortunately, Titanic only had 20 lifeboats, with each having the capacity to hold only 65 people. This meant that only around 1,200 people could be saved, while there were over 2,200 people aboard. In the chaos, the lifeboats were launched with only 27 to 28 people on them, far fewer than their capacity. The ship was sinking rapidly, and many people tried to jump into the cold sea to survive. The water temperature was -2 degrees Celsius, which meant that anyone in the water could only survive for 15 to 30 minutes. Some people accepted their fate, while the crew continued to send distress signals and fire flares in hopes of getting the attention of any nearby ships. However, no help arrived. As Titanic's bow dipped underwater and its stern rose, Captain Smith instructed the crew to abandon ship. The ship's stern eventually broke off, and at 2:20 a.m., the Titanic split into two and sank into the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. More than 1,500 people aboard the ship lost their lives. Captain Smith remained aboard the ship until the very end. 2 hours later, at dawn, the Carpathia arrived to rescue the survivors, but only 706 people had survived the tragedy. 3 days later, on April 18, 1912, the Carpathia reached New York, where 40,000 people were waiting in the rain. This incident raised many questions, and one shocking revelation from the investigation showed that there was another ship, the SS California, just 37 kilometers away from Titanic when it sank, but it did not come to Titanic's aid. The investigation found that the SS California had turned off its wireless radio and decided not to proceed due to the iceberg warnings. The search for Titanic's wreckage continued for decades, and it wasn't until September 1985 that the wreckage was found by American oceanographer Robert Ballard. The investigation into the wreckage revealed that the Titanic had broken into two pieces because of the pressure from the iceberg. It was discovered that the rivets used to hold the Titanic's hull together were made of cast iron, not steel, which caused the hull to fail when the iceberg struck. Today, the Titanic's wreckage is slowly being lost to the depths of the ocean, and it is believed that in the coming years, the remains of the ship will completely disappear. This tragic event was deeply heartbreaking, but nearly 58 years later, another remarkable chapter in space history unfolded. For an inspiring story of survival and ingenuity, don't miss our YouTube video on the Apollo 13 mission and its incredible journey against all odds.
Thank you for being a part of the RisePeak community. Together, we're climbing higher, discovering more, and turning dreams into achievements. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep the inspiration alive. Your journey is just beginning. Stay motivated, stay curious, and as always, keep rising.